What I'm concerned about is if we don't have enough momentum and enough positive stories about why AI is so powerful education, I'm afraid that, some negativity will lead to a full regression and schools starting to be really nervous about using it in any context. So I'm just want to build positive goodwill and find some really amazing use cases before that happens. I think it's inevitable that it will.
Hey everyone, my name's Kyle Wallgren. Yes, we're still at ISTE and we're doing another episode of the Business of Education. Our next guest is actually probably one of the first education podcasts that I ever got to be on. So now the shoe's on the other foot. Alex has been involved in the education EdTech space for over 15 plus years, has an amazing podcast, likes to shine a light on the education space. Alex, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kyle.
So I think I met you through Ben, I think at StartEd.
Yep.
You guys both have experience in the EdTech space, both had companies that you went on, and now your mission is shining a light on the much needed efforts in the EdTech space. You guys also do some advising for early startups. What's your favorite thing you're working on right now in the EdTech space?
Yeah.
That you'd like to tell people about?
Yeah. So I've worked in EdTech for quite a long time, but I've really never seen anything like this AI revolution that we're sort of facing right now, and getting to experience. It's good and bad at the same time.
Right.
I really love advising early stage companies, especially in the AI space, because I think, nobody knows where this technology is going. I think it's going to be as big as cell phones, as big as the internet, and we're here in the second year of what's going to be a very long, growth pattern. So I just find it incredibly interesting scouting and talking to people who are doing AI companies with new ideas and then trying to help them grow them and trying to help them figure out how to burst into a pretty complicated market selling to schools.
Yeah, it's definitely complicated. Selling to schools is a complication in itself, but now AI, I always say that AI is kind of a dirty word. It's been around for way longer than what we try and realize,
Sure.
With the big ChatGPT push, it came on everybody's forefront. But, AI has been around early Netflix, matching movies. But with the way Gen AI is going right now,
Yeah.
what are one of the things that you're concerned about without regulation maybe, or wherever it's at? What's something on your radar to make sure we're training people properly?
Yeah, so something I am concerned about, and we talk about this on our podcast a lot, is that AI can do almost anything. And yes, you're right, generative AI, one small branch of a much wider field of AI.
Right.
It can do an incredible amount, and it can basically mimic and simulate human thinking as closely as we've ever been able to do so far. It's the interfaces between humans, whether that's teachers or students or people outside of education and AI, that where things get really interesting, because right now it's so early that we have this sort of open conduit. Mm-hmm. Kids can ask anything. If a kid goes onto a free version of ChatGPT or of Claude or of the Gemini, they can ask absolutely anything, and the system itself has to be trained to know what's appropriate to answer, what's accurate, what's age appropriate. And so what I'm afraid of, my fear in this space, is that when you have something that open, at any moment something odd can happen.
Right.
Something can go wrong. Kids are very malleable. There's a lot of things that might happen and will happen in that space. And what I'm concerned about is if we don't have enough momentum and enough positive stories about why AI is so powerful education, I'm afraid that, some negativity will lead to a full regression and schools starting to be really nervous about using it in any context. So I'm just want to build positive goodwill and find some really amazing use cases before that happens. I think it's inevitable that it will.
You're probably right. The internet was something that was never going to work, 25 years ago. Now I've had people on the show that were around when they were implementing internet into schools. Now they're implementing, how to use Gen AI into schools.
Exactly.
And a lot's changed over the last 12 months, just on permission for people to use students' data within that, Gen AI environment. What are some barriers, or let me reword the question. What are some things that, as new EdTech founders, we could be doing to continue to bring comfort and start breaking down barriers of adopting Gen AI in the EdTech space?
That's a terrific question. I think what EdTech founders really have to do right now is put themselves in the shoes of not only their end users, not only the students and teachers who are going to use the product, but also the administrators, the IT people, the procurement people, the whole stack, the principals, the whole stack of people inside a school environment that are going to be implementing this, and realize that all of them are putting their neck out a little bit by trying to use a new tool that uses such brand new technology. They're putting their neck out for parents. They're putting their neck out for the school board. They're putting their neck out for their bosses, up and down the stack. And I think EdTech companies could be some are doing a great job of this, but I think across the board we could be a lot more proactive in helping de-risk and defuse that kind of worry that when somebody does something new, the risk of failure is real, and the risk of failure in an AI context could be catastrophic. It could be really, really not catastrophic. It could be very visible,
right?
And it could cause a lot of issues. So I think it's really about empathy building, co-designing with teachers and principals and admins, and just really getting into the heads of the buyer personas and understanding what do you have to do? What do you actually have to do to protect data privacy? What do you actually have to do to make sure that there's not going to be any negative press around this? What do you have to do to make sure that you're not going to get a backlash from a school board or from teachers? It's a lot to ask, but it's the reality right now. Getting people to adopt something that new, you have to de-risk it, and you have to understand that when they ask questions about it not working, you can't just wave it off and say, don't worry, it'll work out, or kids already cheat, or things like that. You have to really have good answers so that they can pass those good answers to their constituencies.
Yeah, I've learned definitely through our own ventures that if a human does it a certain way and you mimic that certain way and it's not necessarily right, the mimicking of the technology is what they identify as the wrong side of things.
100%.
It's not the human way of doing it. One of the areas that I see maybe might make sense or help out the EdTech space is this is definitely not a field I would go into to try and do some sort of short-term sales or some kind of scheme thing, because the sales cycles are so long in EdTech.
Yep.
You do have to really put a lot of effort in to make a sale. So, maybe that adoption rate in EdTech might slow things down there. But on the other side, teachers are concerned about how kids are using it within the classroom.
Right.
Are they cheating? You mentioned that earlier. Cheaters are always going to cheat. But the thing that I really find about it from my own personal journey is learning how to ask it the questions so I can get the answers that align with my voice the best. The other thing that's really interesting, I guess there's enough articles out there so I can put in the context or tone of Kyle Wallgren, and it gets it pretty close now.
Yeah.
But, the hardest part for me, and, I'm 39 years old, is learning how to ask it the right questions. What are some areas that we can help, bring visibility to how much more is actually needed to use AI within the classroom instead of just stepping back right away and be like, oh, AI is scary. But you actually have to put in some work to utilize AI as a whole. How would you make a suggestion in breaking down that barrier or, bringing comfort into a new teacher who's never used it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the way I try to think about it and try to frame it when I'm talking to educators or those who don't have a lot of familiarity yet with prompt engineering or with this generation of Gen AI is, instead of thinking about, the exact phrasing you use, even though that is important at the moment, think about AI's core functionality, right? It can take basically endless amounts of data. Data can mean lots of different things, but it's trained on the ChatGPT and Anthropic's Claude are trained basically on the internet as well as other sources. So It can take endless amounts of data we can't ever imagine doing on our own. It can synthesize it in real time, and then it can feed back out something in a way that is actually interpretable by a human. It's not, so if you really think about it that way, for one thing, you don't get locked into the concept of text. Prompt engineering, this is the very early days, and it's going to be very soon. It already is starting to happen where the way we're going to interact with AI will be through voice, it'll be through video, it'll be through image uploading, it'll be through passive interaction, like you'll be doing something and an AI will pop up and say, hey, I can do this for you faster.
Right.
We're in a very passing phase where prompt engineering is the key, where, like, as you say, figuring out how to ask the right questions. I think that's quite temporary. So when I try to talk to people about AI and the possibilities of it, I try to get them to focus on sort of the underlying capabilities. It can, you can train it on any amount of data. That can mean endless data, or it can mean a very small contained set of data, like a book.
Right.
I was talking to a teacher here, and we were talking about how you could train an AI on the first 3 chapters of a book, which is where, let's say, kids are reading a book and they've only 3 chapters in. You could train an AI chatbot just on those first 3 chapters and tell it, you don't know the end of this book. If a kid asks you how it's going to turn out, you don't know because you've only read the first 3 chapters. But given the first 3 chapters, how could you actually have a conversation with the characters or ask about themes or start to develop an essay topic? And it will actually meet you exactly where you are. It will know exactly what you know as the student. Right. And so you can contain the amount of data, you can steer it in different directions, you can make it simulate different types of people, right? You can tell it to act like a tutor or a teacher, you can tell it to act like an interviewer, you can tell it to act like a coach, you can tell it to act like a marketing professional.
And get very granular with even what kind of tone you want.
Exactly. So you can tweak its parameters of what kind of human it's going to try to simulate, and you can tweak the data that it's using to be able to generate an answer. And as we get into wild new ways to use this, I think understanding what's actually happening just at that level below the hood, I think allows everybody to make more sense of why it's going to evolve the way it's going to evolve.
Yeah, the last few conversations that I've got to have from other people's point of view, one of the gentlemen was talking about image generation through AI, and that was what he was most excited about, was seeing how fast images are advancing through Gen AI, even getting like the details of the art stroke within a fraudulent picture, or could be a fraudulent picture, and the level of accuracy there. I still find it funny watching them like create logos or something on Adobe or whatever that is, the ChatGPT image one, but it changes every time. They can't go back and recreate the same image.
That's
and
right.
Just make small changes. It's dramatically different every time. So it's interesting to watch.
They're working on it. The Midjourney does have a feature now where you can sort of circle a small part of an image and say, I want just this part changed. And it's pretty good at doing that. You can take an image and zoom out. So it keeps the same image, but then it builds the world around it.
Oh, wow.
I think it's just so important for us in this education and AI space to recognize that these are the biggest, best resource companies in the world that are working on this, and they're pulling out every researcher they can find and paying them whatever they could possibly make.
Yeah, they're spending billions.
Yeah, so any limitation, pretty much any limitation it has now, will be quickly overcome. And I think, what's exciting about, as you say, Kyle, about image generation and video generation, which is also about to really be pretty spectacular, is that it puts the power of creation in the hands of educators and students.
Yeah.
Another thing that came up at this conference is educators are always asking, they want to use the most popular song that kids all know right now. That would be, Taylor Swift, I guess, right now.
Probably, yeah.
And in a classroom environment, you can do that. You can play a Taylor Swift song. There's fair use policy. But if you play a Taylor Swift song in a classroom, anything you do there is then contained to the classroom. You can't do anything with it. Somebody was just talking about that. But you can tell an AI to make a Taylor Swift-like song about anything you like. And as soon as it makes that, the teacher owns that.
That's interesting. That's super interesting. I have to give a TEDx talk here in a few days, actually. And I've been using Gen AI to ask questions to try and formulate how I want a sentence to sound.
Yep.
And the amount of iterations that I've gotten out of the same question just by changing, like, I'm trying to get this emotion out of this part of the talk? How can I, do that? And how can I make sure that I'm engaging the right, and it just to watch it change and adopt so quick. And you could ask that same
Exactly.
question a month ago and you would have been like, this stuff's broken. And then today it's like 100% different, especially the speech stuff.
Yes.
The speech AI has got me a little freaked out. Watching the Stanley Cup playoffs, there was a lot of videos, memes of players saying stuff where you're like, wow, this sounds exactly like the player. Do you think that we're going to see, some big fakes going on there? What do you think we can do to protect ourselves?
100% that is going to happen. And that's exactly one of the, you asked earlier about the concerns. This deepfake world is coming. And as the AI gets better, it just makes deepfakes better and better and better, right? You can do video that it'll be any moment now where you'll be able to see video that you will absolutely not know whether it was real or not. And epistemologically, it's a very strange moment for humanity to not be able to believe video. We've considered that photography and video like the source of truth. So It's a huge question. From an education perspective, I'm concerned that when we hit that moment and we have a sort of societal freakout, which I think is justified, the education community sort of gets very conservative and pulls back and starts saying, oh man, if kids are going to start doing this and simulating their other kids, or they're going to be, we can't have this in the classroom. And I'm just really, I think we have to, as a community, see these things coming and know they're going to come and know that they really are going to be scary, just like some of the things that the internet brought us are scary, right? But we have to balance that with the potential and really, really speedily showcase what AI could do for education and to empower kids' creativity, so that when these things happen, they are already happening, and they're going to get worse and worse and worse. We don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
You couldn't say it any better. I want to see how we can build out individual learning paths for kids that wouldn't have necessarily been involved in school. I was one of those kids. I hated school, but I think if I could have had some topics that were interesting to me, I probably would have excelled. But I didn't want to go read Charlotte's Web or Old Yeller. That wasn't my thing. But now today, we can take so much information and be like, hey, little Billy needs a book for a second grader with Alexile 240. He's having, issues with TH words. Please generate some content for him. And bang, little Billy gets 300 books about football. And he's, dove in for hours, spending time on task. And I'm super excited to see how that works. We both have spent some time in the reading space. Readocracy. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Tell us about some of the time you spent there and, how that's helped you in your journey.
Sure. So I've sort of been involved in reading in a number of different ways over my career. Readocracy is an interesting company. I'm an angel investor in Readocracy. It's actually not a learn to read company. It's a company that follows what you read throughout your day, through when you're reading on the internet, when you're reading articles about sports or technology or gardening or anything, it can actually track what you're reading. It can give you summaries of how much time you're spending on different sources, what the mood of those sources is, how you might want to assess yourself to make sure you're remembering what you actually read, even though you read it naturally on your own. So it's really trying to make informal learning, the informal learning we all do when we read things online or watch videos. It works with YouTube and things like that too, into formal learning, into something we can actually track. So that's really exciting. I've also worked with Scholastic on reading products in the past. We did a product called iRead, which I loved working on. It was a game-based reading product. And I consult with a number of AI companies that are doing learn to read, doing literacy applications in AI, which are incredibly fascinating. One of the big features, as you just said, is there's no limit on the ability to generate content that's right at the right level, that focuses on the students' misconceptions, that's interest-based, as you said. So those are all huge. But I think it can go even further. I mean, we're starting to see, companies in the reading space where it actually can listen to kids reading out loud and give them real-time feedback in a safe environment. We're seeing, that the phonics movement sort of generate this entire suite of different capabilities in reading that we've just never imagined we would ever have before. I mean, infinite patience, infinite tutoring, infinite repetitions, assessment on demand, books on demand.
Yeah.
And when you put this stuff all together, stories on demand, the ability to steer a story, the kids can make up the stories as they go, the ones that they're reading.
My kids love playing Roblox because it's independently built on the lands or whatever it's called that fits them and what they're interested in.
Exactly.
And after watching my kids play hours and hours on Roblox, I was like, this is exactly how we can save education, is by making it customizable for the individual. Because ultimately, you just want them to spend time on task. Nobody would tell you that I care about the topic as long as they're putting in the work, right?
Yep.
I think that would be a general consensus right across that platform. So I'm super excited to do that. You spend a lot of time putting people together. You do some consulting in the EdTech space. But one of the things that I like to talk about at the end of every podcast is how important networking is to you and how it's helped you succeed in the different areas that you've elevated yourself in.
It's a great question. I mean, I've had a really upfront seat to the value of networking over the last couple of years. I started my EdTech Insiders podcast about 2.5 years ago. We have done 250 interviews so far, and it's been unbelievable to be able to reach out to people, as you know from your podcast, to reach out to people who you admire, people doing interesting work in any way, people who are friends of friends, or, and be able to say, hey, come talk to me for an hour. I want to learn about what you're doing, and I can learn about what you're doing and also broadcast what you're doing.
And also help you find more people to.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've expanded my network enormously through that, as well as I've worked in many different places in EdTech. So I already sort of had a long tail of connections. But I love networking. I'm not as good at it in person. My Ben Cornell, the EdTech Insiders co-founder, loves the rubbing elbows. I really like talking to people, so I just love getting on Zoom calls, learning what people are doing, and or getting on LinkedIn and connecting with them. And it's changed my whole EdTech life. So I love
LinkedIn. It's one of my favorite things. What do you think when you look at the young EdTech founders? I like to focus on EdTech founders just because that's the area I spend my time in.
Of course.
What's the number one thing they're doing wrong when trying to build out a network or build or scale their platform? And how maybe some advice you could shorten their time zone or time frame.
That's a great question.
Into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even though founders know this in theory, sometimes what they do wrong is that they approach various people, whether it's for partnerships or potential clients, in the spirit of trying to sort of explain what they're doing. Right? I have a product. Let me tell you or demo for you what I'm doing. And realistically, the best way to get somebody on the phone, or the best way to really build rapport with somebody, is to ask them what they need.
Yeah.
What are they doing? What are they thinking about these days? How can you help? It's incredibly powerful and it's incredibly simple. And I would say in many cases, it's more likely to lead to a qualified lead or a relationship than sort of that transactional going in, being like, let me show you what I got. So I highly recommend that people be very proactive about reaching out, but think about what somebody might be looking for. What are the biggest problems in their district or school? What are the biggest problems in their company that you might be able to help them with? That's what I would recommend.
You touched on so many good things. The whole reason I do this podcast is because I have, I want to learn. I'm thirsty to try and learn about something that I'm trying to figure out, or challenges I'm having with my company that same day. But I'm going to say 9.5 times out of 10, I can have a conversation with the podcast, ask the questions around their expertise to get my answers and really shine a light on what they're doing. And then by the end of it, they're like, wow, you have a lot of passion for education. What is it that you do? And then I get, 5 minutes to tell them about what I'm doing. Exactly. And they're like, hey, let me make an introduction for you. So I don't even have to tell them what I'm doing. The simple reason that I'm just trying to expand the EdTech space opens up more opportunities for me to talk about EdSoma and what we're doing there than me saying, hey, can you help me with this? And people get that so backwards. So thank you for pointing that out. I
totally agree.
Alex, I know you got 100 other things to do at Etsy. There's a lot of vendors here, a lot of cool stuff to check out. So thank you for coming on the show. And I look forward to talking to you again.
It's a pleasure, Kyle. Thanks for the invite.